cozier group here than, than before. Uh, so hopefully everybody got questions answered. I had a chance to talk to Deb this afternoon and, ran through a lot of stuff to, make sure in my mind that all the things that seemed to me like obvious questions, there were good explanations for. If anybody has any more commentary on that, we can pick that up before we jump into other items. Okay, so jumping into other items. Penn, go ahead.
Oh, anyway, I just wanted to say it was nice to hear Jessica from the Board of Health. I chatted with her a couple of times, and it seems like with her on board, some really good changes and some tightening of the ship and some efficiencies are in the offing. So it was nice. I thought that was good to see at the meeting.
Yeah, and we'll have to see. I felt the same way, and we'll have to see if when we get to next budget season, we can find ways to support those efforts because they seemed really, really like they were going in a good direction.
She's a smart cookie, I think.
All right, so I had just one announcement. Then we've got minutes to approve, and then I can give an update and we can talk about regional school stuff and any other things that people wanted to pick up on. So the one announcement is some of you may have seen that on Monday evening, and you heard this from during the public comment period, Select Board is meeting with Bob Murchison to talk about his various development proposals in town. So, as everybody knows, he has a host of 40B projects that he's proposed around town, which have met, various bits of resistance from here, there, or wherever. And he has proposed kind of a grand compromise with the town. And that's going to get talked about at a select board meeting on Monday night. It's a late meeting. It starts at 7:45 because they're going to do, starting at 6:30, an executive session where I think they're going to have a talk about what do they think about all of this and what's their strategy for meeting with Bob. But I just wanted to make sure everybody knew about that. It's not really directly advisory business, although obviously has financial implications. But it's of broad interest to a lot of people in town. I didn't know how many people, how many of us would be interested. So I went ahead this morning. I posted an advisory meeting so that if 5 of us show up, we can all speak and participate in whatever way we want. So you'll see that there's an advisory meeting posted, not obligatory in any way. I only did that as a precaution in case a bunch of us are there and people want to talk about stuff. And somebody then says, hey, well, that was a deliberation. You can't do that, whatever. So that was just you'll see that meeting posted, but that was just to cover that. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew about that. Any other announcements, liaison reports before we jump to approving minutes from our last meeting? Okay, so let me pop minutes up. So this is from the June 12th meeting. And they should hopefully be visible now. Visible? Good, okay. I read over them this afternoon and made just a couple small changes, which are red lines. So I'll just scroll through these quickly so you can see the red lines. They were really just cleaning up things that I hadn't done a good job of getting before. And making the citation of people and who is speaking a little more consistently cited. So any other corrections or changes to these minutes? And if not, I would welcome a motion to approve the minutes as corrected on the screen.
So moved.
Second.
All right, and let's see, just got to get to the right place here in my notes. Okay, and let's do a roll call. Nora,
Aye.
Wasim,
Aye.
Mike Winters,
Aye.
Mike Flanagan,
Aye.
Shelley,
Aye.
Penn,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and I'm I as well. Okay, great. So then a quick update on, let me undo the screen share. Quick update on school committee stuff, just to report on a few things that have happened. One, in terms of the letter draft, I did a rewrite of that letter. Peter Moores and I spent a lot of time reading over the relevant state regs that govern regional school budgets and excess and deficiency. We checked in with town council. Town council didn't want to offer a lot, kind of not really experts on school finance, so we didn't get a lot there. But Peter and I think came to kind of a common understanding of sort of how to interpret the regs. As we talked about at our prior meeting, the regs are a little bit ambiguous. They don't cover every situation. But so I did a redraft of the letter that reflected our Peter's and my common understanding of the regs. He and I are still going back and forth a bit on wording and in terms of deciding the tone to take in terms of how legalistic to make everything. And so as soon as he and I converge on that, I will send a draft around. I thought about sending a draft around yesterday and then thought, rather than asking people to read that draft, probably better to just wait a little bit longer until Peter and I have converged and then send around that draft. So that is progressing. I think our common understanding of the regs is a little bit different than what got talked about at our last meeting, in that our view is that capital items are part of their budget and that they should be presenting all of them to the towns for approval at town meetings, whether the capital items are financed by borrowing, in which case they would have come to the towns anyways, or if they're financed by E&D or financed through some other mechanism, they're all part of the budget and they all should be coming through the towns for approval at budget time. If an item came up later in the year, like fire suppression system broke, as happened, and needed to be repaired, they could use E&D for that purpose. But that would represent a change in the budget, and they would have to notify the towns that they were doing that, and the towns would then have 45 days to disapprove that. Of course, in practice, that's never going to happen because that would require, or almost never going to happen because that would require a special town meeting, and Sherborn at least isn't going to call a special town meeting to disapprove of a $40,000 E&D expenditure by the regional schools. And then the rest of the letter is very much the same, with every capital project should be in the capital plan, should stay in the capital plan until the project's complete, and the other elements that were there before about kind of how they communicate with the towns, and our pitch for a lower level of E&D, though that is not something where we have any direct authority over them, but that pitch remains in the draft. And then again, as I said, as soon as Peter and I converge on language, I will send that around. The other thing I was going to report on that is that I did meet with the chair and vice chair of Dover Warrant and the chair of their capital budget committee and explained everything to them. And I think the bottom line is that they, I think, probably will agree to sign on to a letter that will lead to some more negotiations over language, because undoubtedly there'll be something that we have that isn't going to quite work for them, and we'll have to sort of work that out. But I do think it's worth the effort, because I think if it comes from Dover Warrant, Sherborn Advisory, both capital budget committees, I think it makes it much harder for the regional schools to say, Sherborn, you guys always complain about everything. Dover's fine, just relax. And so I think getting them on board will really put the schools in more of a situation where I think they're going to feel like they really need to go along with some of the things that we are asking them to do. So that's basically the story. One other just interesting side note that came up in that is we got, actually, as shocking as this may sound, more information from the schools than Dover did. So a lot of the things that I shared with them were kind of news to them. And then I think they were a little bit dismayed that they hadn't heard a lot of that directly from the schools, from the regional schools and so on. So I think that kind of got them pretty quickly on board with the idea of more transparency and more communication from the schools to the towns. All right, so that was just a brief update, and that's really everything I have. Happy, obviously, to talk about any more of that people want to talk about, or any other things that we should be talking about. But that was just things that I wanted to share. Since we were all already together tonight. Nora, go ahead.
Hey, good evening. And my apologies for, I just had in my head 7, so I apologize. Sorry that you had to ping me on the early.
We're all programmed for advisory 7. We're all programmed that way.
Sorry, anyway, 2 things. With what you were just piggybacking on what you were saying, ultimately, is it the select board? Is it the citizens? Who actually sets that percentage at the end of the day? Or is that 100% the school?
The percentage for E&D.
Hmm?
So here are the rules for E&D. School committee, regional school committee votes to set up an E&D fund, which they've done. They did that, ages ago. So they have an E&D account. And if the balance in that account is more than 5% of their budget, then they are obliged to use the excess, the part over 5%, and apply it towards either this year's or next year's operating budget. And that's state law that they're required to do that. If it is less than 5%, at the end of the year, because the state the state certifies their E&D just like the state certifies our free cash.
Mhm.
If the state certifies E&D that's less than 5% of their budget, then it's entirely at their discretion. So the town, neither the select board nor advisory, we can complain, we can say we don't like what you're doing, but all the statutory authority is with them.
The
We
school
think
committee. Okay.
School committee, yes, with the regional school committee. The regional school committee adopted a policy that their target for E&D is between 3% and 4%, but that's a target and that's a policy they adopted. So that because of those rules, that's the reason why I keep saying, advisory nor the select board, the towns don't really have authority over E&D. What I think we want to try to do with this letter is get it that if they're going to use E&D to finance something, that 1, they have to notify the towns, and 2, if it's a capital item, that should be part of the budget, and that should be approved as part of the budget, whether the financing is E&D or any other source.
Okay, I just wanted that clarified.
Yeah.
And I have two more things to hit on.
Sure.
The Council of Aging person that that's phasing out. Or not phasing out, but retiring.
Right.
Is that start off a newer, lower budget? Are they hiring? Was that, how?
Oh, so that's a good question. So Christina Gallant was appointed to that position. And I don't know the answer to the salary question. Penn, do you have any info on that?
I don't, and I don't know. I think they're hoping, this is just what out of somewhat casual conversation, hoping to bring back a third person, because Christina moved up essentially, but I don't know how that affected her salary.
Okay.
Not know that. Then my final thing is, we can just chat for a moment, like about the sustainability. Did you find out any information about the sustainability coordinator? Looking at that thing with Natick, they're making 80 to 100,000. Well, that's Natick with so much more depth to it, right? For sustainability and whatnot, versus something like Sherborn. Could it be just a part-time person? Again, I'd really love to, going in the future, whether I continue on advisory or not after my term, I think it's important not just to look at salaries or like, oh, for example, we had a grant, but then the grant tapped out, what they just said on the charging stations, right? So if we really incorporate it, not just the salary, but then the plus for what the actual costs are. Anyway, I didn't know if you made any progress or any information on that sustainability piece.
Yeah, thanks, Nora. So uh, the last I heard, so that letter came in. As I mentioned to some of you, I just kind of took that letter as a routine thing. It wasn't a surprise to me that people in town who are very focused on environmental issues would be, very anxious for the town to hire a sustainability coordinator. With the last sustainability coordinator, there was a group of people in town who were very enthusiastic about what she did. There was a group of people in town who were not so enthusiastic about what she was doing. That fundamentally, I don't think has changed. So it didn't surprise me that people who are really focused on those issues and supporters of that kind of work in town, would have sent a letter like that. Didn't it just it I found that almost, well, yeah, of course that's what people do. They send a letter to the select board advisory trying to try to emphasize their position. The last I heard from talking to Jeremy, the intention is for this to be a part-time position for Sherborn, uh, either shared with another town or with some, adjustments within town hall of who's doing what and how many hours. But that, this would be in terms of, somebody else may be picking up some of these responsibilities, but this was intended to be a part-time position. That was made, I think, very clear at our meetings in the spring. And I'd have to go back and listen to the tape to be sure, but I think we got a commitment from Jeremy that, his intention was, this would be a part-time position, and that was the plan. I haven't talked to Jeremy recently to confirm all of that, but my understanding is that Penn has had a conversation with Jeremy, and maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, my hand was raised for two things, and that was one of them. Yeah, one of the things, when, back at our all-day meeting, which I still look back on with nostalgia, just.
We all fondly remember that.
But I put a hold on that item specifically to get that commitment from Jeremy on the record. And it was like, yeah, the plan is a part-time thing, maybe shared with another town, but not a full-time thing. And I just met with Jeremy Monday and just sort of went over a whole bunch of things. And I mentioned the letter there, and he said, yes, that process, the process is still on, that's still the plan in place to make it a part-time person, possibly shared with another town. So that sort of reassured me on that point.
Oh, yeah. The letter did at the end say, they were hoping to get a response, but I think rather than trying to craft an advisory response, I sent them just a generic, thanks for sending this in, I'll share it with people, and perhaps leave it to Jeremy and Town Hall to respond, because they would be able to, with more authority than we could, say, what the intention and plan is. And did you have a second thing, Penn?
I did, actually. I wanted to circle back to the schools. And the first thing I really wanted to say is thank you, Dan, so much for tackling that and engaging our counterparts and more in Dover. I think it's a really important matter, and I really appreciate your following through on it and continuing so thoroughly. And I do remember back to the school committee meeting that Mike sent us the link to, and it was interesting because they were very pleased that unlike some other towns or some other districts, they didn't just spend down they didn't spend down their excess money so they ended up flat. They actually put it into the E&D. So it was, on the one hand, spending money just to spend money is not a good thing. On the other hand, it seems like the process of building that as, to use a loaded phrase, a slush fund is somewhat, intentional. So I'm glad we're keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, thanks. And I will, as soon as we have a draft, we'll circle back with them and try to see if we can bring them on board. And who knows, maybe we'll end up doing a joint meeting at some point. If we need to actually all kind of approve language. Mike, go ahead.
Sir, Dan, was there anything that we spoke about at the last in-person meeting on the school board that was inaccurate? The comments made that were that was.
Yeah, so I'd probably put a little. This is going to sound like, I'm doing my Washington D.C. bureaucrat thing, but I had many years of practicing that. I put a little bit of a finer point on it. So I think there are things where, where at least Peter's and my interpretation evolved, which, I guess you could say that there was stuff that was said that we now, wouldn't say. And I think there are two aspects of that. One is, I think we started out thinking, or at least I did, and this is what was reflected in that earlier draft of the letter, that really the regional school committee has absolute 100% purview over E&D. And the way that I now understand that to be a little bit different is capital projects, I think, should be considered part of the budget that they present to the towns for approval. And even if they're using E&D to finance one of those capital projects, they still need to get the project approved by the town, with the exception of something that happens mid-year, which presumably would be something unanticipated. Otherwise, it would have been in the capital plan. But if something pops up mid-year, yeah, they could finance it with E&D, but then they need to notify the towns. That was not, I think, made super clear, that was a requirement. And it would then kick in the 45-day window for the towns to disapprove it. And at the last meeting, I thought that 45-day thing just didn't apply, because if they use E&D, it's not part of the budget, so none of those rules apply. But on multiple additional readings and a lot of talking with Peter about it, I now think that capital items should be part of the budget, which means if they later in the year use E&D for a capital item that's changing the budget, and they need to notify the towns. They may disagree with that. And then it may be a matter of, dueling lawyers. My hope is that if both we and Dover come at them and say, look, here's how we'd like budgeting to happen going forward, that they're just going to decide in the interest of good intergovernmental relations and transparency to, yeah, sure, fine, we'll do it that way. But we'll see. They may dig in their heels. I'm hoping we can have a kind of cooperative conversation with them about budget process rather than they dig in heels and there's a big fight. So those are the two things that, if you wanted to say it more harshly, you'd say, that, I said or other people said that, we're wrong. I'll stick with my putting a finer point on it that are.
I didn't mean to call. I was generally curious, actually, if I said anything wrong or inaccurate. So I didn't mean to call anything.
No, I'm just messing around. All those years of being in DC where you have to answer questions without ever getting pinned down to something.
Thanks.
What else?
Oh, Dan.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, Nora. We'll talk. I've got stories I could tell, but I won't do it now. All right. So I think then we're at the end. So I, again, just wanted to, Mike Flanagan and Wasim, huge thanks. Paul said to me earlier today that if we were meeting in person, he would have brought a cake to celebrate, to send you guys off, which I thought was a really, really nice thought. And I have just been really happy that both of you've been on the committee, learned a ton from you, and really appreciate the contributions over your time on the committee.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
it. I learned a lot from Wasim. I was channeling his regionalization thinking when I asked about the food trucks, because that was a learning from Wasim. So yeah.
And that's a great point, because it's just ridiculous for all three towns to do that. Just a huge waste. All right, so unless anybody has anything else, I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
One quick question.
Just want to
Sure.
say thank you all
Right. For being on advisory and for
do we pick back-
continuing
yeah.
to be on advisory.
Yeah,
So
thank you, Wasim. When
nice
do
to
we
meet
pick
you all
back
as
up
well.
again? I'm just wondering about having a rough idea about when we kick into for next year.
Oh, yeah, okay, so preview of schedule. So we will meet, you know, I'll have to figure out dates sometime late August, early September, because we will have 3 new members, and we will need to reorganize, which means elect a chair and a vice chair, so that, you know, we're set up for next year. Our terms run through August 1. It's weird, you know, the fiscal year runs through June 30th. But because of the thing we just did with the year-end transfers, advisory stays on until the end of July so that, you know, can approve year-end transfers. So we'll meet around then to reorganize, and then we will meet a couple times in the fall. I don't know, maybe 3, I don't know how many, but we will meet some in the fall because we'll have to figure out a recommendation for COLA for next year. There'll be a recommendation from the personnel board that'll come to us. My hope is with some new people on the personnel board, they might be a little bit more active and engaged than they've been in the past. So we'll do that. And then the budget stuff for real will start up in January when we will start reviewing budgets. Last year, you know, since Jeremy did the roll up that he presented to us and to the select board in early January, I schedule sort of every other week meetings, thinking that we wouldn't need as many meetings. As last year went, it seemed like there was enough interest, questions, discussion that, you know, we ended up adding some meetings, and, you know, we'll have to figure out for next year, you know, whether we want to just plan to meet every week or every other week and how to do that. And, you know, it will depend some on what Jeremy's plans are with what sort of budget roll up he wants to do and what sort of a role he wants to play in that process. But that's more or less the plan.
Thanks, it's helpful.
All right, I can see everyone is just smiles all around at that. Yeah. Yeah. See, Mike, Wasim, see what you're going to be missing? You know, it's terrible. Can't believe it. Okay, so unless there's anything else, then again, would welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Thanks. Okay, Mike Flanagan.
Aye.
Paul.
Aye.
Shelley.
Aye.
Penn.
Aye.
Mike Winters.
Aye.
Wasim.
Aye.
And Nora.
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. So 8-0, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Mike. Bye, Wasim. Nice working with you.
Yeah,
Cheers.
likewise.
I know capital budget's gonna miss you.
Happy summer, everyone. Happy summer.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.